landslide. There's a theory called catastrophism. Catastrophes, right? And that was the prevailing thought. But in the mid-1700s, a Scottish gentleman, a farmer, had some properties, and he was out on one of his farms, and he was looking around, and he kind of went, oh, you know, the stream is over here. I don't remember it being here. I remember it being way over here. So why did this thing change course? He said, man, I don't remember any big catastrophe that changed the course of this river. He said, but you know, I do remember about 10 years ago. We had that little flow, and the bend that was over there kind of shifted over here a little bit, but it was basically still there. And then over the next couple of years, it kind of eroded through here. And then another year, that meander bend kind of got cut off, and another one formed over here. And about 2 years ago, it moved. So, you know, it wasn't any one big catastrophe. It was just all these little events here and there that accumulated during the last 10 years. But when you look at it at the end members of 10 years ago and today, it looks like a big change. So he kind of came up with this idea that what was really going on in geology wasn't catastrophism, but it was uniformitarianism. Sounds like a religion, doesn't it? But it was this uniform, day-to-day, same old boring stuff, little by little by little, but it all added up if you gave it enough time. Yeah. But James Ussher said that Earth was only 6,000 years old, so how could he possibly be right? There couldn't possibly be enough time to account for all the things on Earth. But it started people thinking, and turns out James Ussher is coming to something. So, this is an example of the question. Which of the following is an example of uniformitarianism? A coal mine fire creates a volcano, sediments being carried downstream by a river, meteorite impact, or Earth's magnetic field disappears over the next 50 years. How about A? Who votes for A? How about B? How about C? How about D? Okay. Well, coal mine fire creating a volcano is never going to happen. There's just not enough energy there. And the real disaster there is you've got a coal mine fire. So, no, that's not so good. Obviously, a meteorite impact is going to be pretty catastrophic, isn't it? And Earth's magnetic field disappearing during the next 50 years. 50 years sounds like a long time. And we know Earth's magnetic field weakens and strengthens, and it flips polarity, so north becomes south, south becomes north. But it usually takes hundreds of thousands of years for that to happen. So in the next 50 years, that would be a catastrophe. But sediment being carried down a river, that's kind of happening all the time, isn't it? That's kind of a day-to-day event. Now, in the middle of August, when there's hardly any water running down the creek, not much sediment is being moved. Probably most of it's just kind of rolling along the bottom. It's not even enough energy to pick it up and suspend it. But boy, what does the creek look like in spring right after the snow melts? It's roaring, isn't it? The water's out over the bank, it's ripping up the banks, trees are coming down, the water's chocolate brown, carrying all this sediment. Same process, it's still just water running downhill. All I've done is I've changed the magnitude, the rate of the process. More water moving faster. So what we're seeing now is this idea that uniformitarianism generally is a pretty slow process. And if I look at geological processes and other processes, that tends to be the case. For instance, growing grass. That happens somewhere between a meter or two a year, maybe 10 years if it's like switchgrass. You know, I mowed the grass on Saturday. I could still see, you know, the tire marks from the mower on Sunday. Monday they were kind of getting hard to see. Tuesday they were completely faded out. And by next Saturday, darn, I had to go mow the yard again. Now, there was no catastrophic event where all of a sudden the grass just kind of went, grew 3 inches. It just was the slow day-to-day stuff. I never noticed it growing, but there it was. Pretty slow. Your fingernails, they grow pretty slowly. They grow about that much a year, about 2.5 inches, 2.5 centimeters. We can now measure with satellites and laser and all that good stuff. We can measure the fact that the Atlantic Ocean is getting wider. It's spreading apart. Europe and the eastern half of the ocean is moving eastward. And North America, Canada, and the western part of the ocean is moving west. The new crust is getting made right in the middle of the Atlantic on the floor. And every year, the Atlantic Ocean is 2.5 inches wider. That's an incredible measurement. We couldn't have done that 40 years ago. So it's widening at the rate that your fingernail grows. We know that Europe and North America were together at one point, and this growth at 2.5 centimeters a year has opened up the entire Atlantic Ocean. How many years do you think they had to take? A lot more than 6,000. We're talking millions and millions of years. Given enough time, little things, little day-to-day changes, all add up. So now what we do is we've kind of modified this uniformitarianism for a little bit. We know catastrophes happen. We see them. So what we say is, yeah, it's basically uniformitarianism, but it gets punctuated once in a while by a catastrophe. The rate and the magnitude of the process gets sped up. We have a flood. So we call this new approach actualism, because this is what actually happens. And it'll be what actually happens until we revise the theory the next time. So we're going to start talking about time. And if you think about it now, a physical rock that you're holding in your hand not only represents the material that makes up the rock, but it also represents the amount of time it took to assemble that material to make the rock. So that rock is a tape recorder of the time and the events that were going on at the time that rock was being unearthed. So we can look at rocks in a couple of different ways, the physical nature and the chronologic nature.